Welcome, everybody, to the Servers Table podcast. Lloyd can't make today as our host, and I'll be hosting as well as Barry here today. And we kind of want to just go back to the foundation of this podcast and, why we wanted to share more information about our experiences here and, you know, in some ways of hopefully supporting others or getting people a different perspective of the actual meditation, the center, just that maybe even the tradition, in itself. But Barry, chime in on this. I know this was your idea, so I thought it was really good that we should, elaborate a little bit more why we're doing this.
Yeah, it like so much of this tradition, it comes up organically. For me, it was, from the very first time that I sat down at the service table, I realized how rarefied a space that is. It's kind of a self-filtering system. By the time that you've had the desire to sign up to a course, to sit a 10-day, and then to come back to serve, you, you just meet some really amazing people. Anywhere from an ordained monk or someone who has never had any kind of experience with anything like this before, has taken one course and then has come back and is having lunch at the table. And there's so many amazing conversations that start at that table, but we only have 45 minutes. And most people are, coming in, they're getting food, they're coming back. I oftentimes get in late because I'm on a slightly different schedule than most people. So it's a very common experience to be sitting at the table engrossed in a conversation, and then it's 11:45. You have to get up and leave. And so you're trying to wrap up the conversation. So that's part of it, to continue the conversations that you have at the table. And Goenka talks about the community at large, and walking with other students, walking the path with other students is a very important part of the path. Some people think he's saying it's more important. The time that you spend in this Dharma community is just as important as meditation. That's a topic for another time, I guess. But it's just to underscore how important the community is and the fellowship with people that are, that are sharing this experience.
Yeah, if I can add some real quick.
Yeah.
Like the Buddha has that story where I believe Ananda asked him about, it's so great having this community, like I feel like it's half of the path of this thing, like this community we have to support us. And then Buddha comes back and tells him it's actually the whole path is the people on the path. So that's just something I always think about. And that's exactly what I was hearing from what, your words coming. For this.
And that's what I was thinking about, that parable. That's one of the places where it's clearly stated.
Mm-hmm.
So through for personal experience, I found being at the service table really valuable. And okay, let's talk about the nature of the course itself. So many people show up here on a Wednesday, they go right to their rooms and boom, they're in it. And then Sunday, they pop out the other end, they get back in their car and they're gone. And there's very little support, and I've been involved in a lot of conversations and on the periphery of conversations with like ATs and management, and there's a concern about supporting people once they leave the center, and having a support system for old students in general. And as long as I've been involved with this, it's over 20 years now, there's been a desire to support people once they leave the center. And it's not easy because Goenka didn't set it up for that. He created this amazing system to teach people this technique, but providing support is a whole nother system. It would take a whole nother fundamental structure to support students once they leave here. That's not what we're set up to do. So this, in a way, is one way of addressing that. Some place where people can come together and just share their experiences, and yeah, talk about
Yeah,
all
I think
aspects of it.
this is definitely a concern. At least I know at Dhamma we've changed some things to support students more before a course, during course, and after a course. So I think that maybe is shifting in this sense. Like people are uh, starting to, make the changes to create this support after, outside of the center, or make it more friendly or approachable for people to even, you know, return to a course even, or come back and ask questions, and, get on a WhatsApp group that, or, start looking for groups. I mean, there is definitely something that's changed with technology even, like over the years. And especially, like, we have Pariyati, for example, .org, that provides a lot of good material for people to outside the course to read more about the Dhamma, about what they're actually doing in the practice. So I think it's just having somebody there to be like, hey, we're here, and if you need more information, there's information, just like this podcast. Oh, there's this podcast about some old students that have served and want to tell people more about, what's going on, and that, you can make friends there, and it's actually pretty nice, et cetera, right? So
Yeah, and even the podcast itself. I mean, just the conversations that we're having. I mean, we've had some really great conversations in these podcasts. They weren't always. You can't always hear them because we've been having some technical difficulties with the audio and stuff. But they've been typical conversations of
yeah.
ones that happen at the service table. So I'm encouraged by that, because it's like it was just Lloyd and I last week, and at the end of it was like, that was a great conversation. I don't know if anybody else enjoyed it, but Lloyd and I were having a good time. You know.
But that's what it's all about. Like,
Yeah.
we're here to have a honest conversation, and if it helps other people or something resonates with them, then, that's all to it. It's not about we're trying to teach anybody anything specific. We're just here opening up this thing that maybe helped us understand something, or our progression on the path, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah. And one of the, just make it clear that we're not ATs, we're not teachers. We just have our own experience that we can talk about and share. But we do have access to ATs, which brings up, after last Sunday's podcast, I had lunch with Dick and was sitting there, and I can't remember what we were talking about, but it was something that Lloyd and I were talking about earlier in the day. And Dick said something, and I thought to myself, wow, he said that so much better, so much more clearly than I tried to talk about it earlier with the conversation with Lloyd. So it's almost like I thought it'd be nice to have some kind of a lead in that just describes what the podcast is, what it's trying to do, and also like a corrections. Like I wanted to go back and listen to that last week's conversation with Lloyd and apply what Dick was saying to it. So it just there's a couple of things there. It's the continuing nature of the conversation, and the fact that I think it's important to have the Council of ATs, because we can get the conversations can get pretty far ranging. I mean, we're operating within the precepts of noble speech, so we're already kind of focusing the conversation. But it's also nice to have some feedback from
And maybe even that's good for people to know, like, hey, you can actually have conversations with ATs if you want to. It's just up to you. Like, they're just people like me and you, Barry. Like, they'll say that all day long. They'll tell you they're also just doing the same thing we're doing, sitting there and observing sensation. They just been doing it maybe a little longer, and maybe they feel more sensation. I mean, I'm not even sure. But, that's why they can explain things better, because they maybe felt it a little more than we have felt it, let's say.
Well, I mean, ATs are trained for sure, but they're trained mostly, my understanding, on the technique itself. You know, each one of them are individuals just like us. They come from different backgrounds. They have differing expertise and knowledge about the technique and the theory, but they're taught very specifically how to bring students back to the technique and how to encourage them in using the,
Yeah, help them with their practice, right? Where they might be
Exactly.
stuck or confused with the words or what to do next
Right.
if this happens. So yeah,
And
they're
I
very
know
good at explaining it.
a great resource is the old students meetings they have once a year. It's a 3-day meeting where any old student can come, and we talk about a lot of different things. And there's a program just for the ATs. A lot of ATs come, and they're talking amongst themselves. And I know that one of the things that they're talking about is how they can better support the students. And they're trying to be available to students, but there's thousands of students out there. I mean, I don't know what the teacher to student ratio is. It's probably about the same as you get in a course. You know, you've got 100 students maybe and 2 ATs. So trying to make them available, especially when they're not on a course, you know, there's supposedly any old student can call a center or a main number and ask to speak to a teacher, and that will get, you know, they'll give a teacher that message, especially if you have a particular teacher in mind.
Mhm.
Or they'll kind of go to the well, just pick a name out of a hat, call them up, say, hey, the student has a question, would you talk to them? So there is that network in place, but it's hard for me to imagine teachers being able to really be available to the entire Vipassana population.
Right.
know?
I mean, it's another job pretty much, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a lot to ask of ATs to, you know, support them after a course, but of course, you know, they're doing it for their you know, because they want to. So they
Yeah.
are doing it. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's giving a lot of yourself to, you know, answer any question and any question anytime people are having. And I think that part of the organization in terms of supporting students after course is getting, you know, bigger and bigger in the sense that they're more available even now. In the sense, I know ATs are even giving out their numbers to students if they ask for it to support them. And again, every center is different. This is, I want to say strictly, we're talking for the one in Georgia, Dhammapadapa. And we've been talking about it more and more in the meetings we have in the outside of the trust meetings. We have other meetings for supporting students, and yeah, they're definitely opening up some things that haven't been done before. So we'll see how it all turns out, but the reception seems really good. You know, the ATs come actually on day 0 and, you know, talk to students even on when they arrive. You know, that usually doesn't happen at most centers, I don't believe. And even on the last day, they come into the cafeteria, you know, in the dining halls, and they mingle with students before they leave. So it's much more like, you know, like approachable, let's say. Like,
Yeah. And one thing I'd recommend is for students to take advantage of the check-ins. You know, some people won't request that. Like at lunchtime, you can sign up for an
the
interview.
interviews, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
opposed to the check-ins. You have to go to a certain amount of check-ins. The teacher will call you in, but you can also request an interview. And a lot of people don't take advantage of that. And I don't know, I just like to recommend that. Just see if, and one thing you can do is go to, whenever you're on a course, ask for an interview, just so you can meet the AT
Mhm.
and get a sense of their personality. And if you keep doing that, you'll probably find an AT that you resonate with and that you can create a relationship with. And that's really that's worth its weight in gold over time. If you have a relationship with an AT that you can call up and talk
Yeah.
to, get advice. So I highly recommend that because they come in all shapes and sizes.
No doubt. Yeah. Like I usually just remind my friends who go for the first time, I'm like you said, don't be shy to have an interview, because not talking for 9 days can be also very challenging. Like, there's nothing wrong with if you really feel like you know you need to talk to someone, go talk to them. Even if it's I always say, even if you don't have a question, you just tell them how you're practicing, making sure it is correct, because maybe you are missing something and you don't realize it. Like, your mind will only, like, my example is my own experience. Like, I couldn't do natural breath the first 2.5 days because
Anapana, watch.
yeah, of Anapana, because even though they're telling me to do this thing, but I was like, oh, it's not possible. Like, I can't use, like, I had to go to the AT and just ask him, am I supposed to use my natural breath? Like, that was my question. Like, just
Sure.
one question. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah, that first course, man, you just it's a fire hose of information, and you don't know what you're being exposed to. I mean, I still, after 11 to 12 courses, I'll sit through the discourses and go, "What? I never heard that before. Did somebody slip that in when I wasn't looking?" So I don't know. For me, you're just always evolving, always learning.
totally.
And as simple as those discourses feel sometimes, they just keep getting deeper. I think as a rule, I think most of the students I've talked to agree with that. You just keep learning more and more from the same material in a sense, just at a deeper level.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're changing. It's like reading a book multiple times, like, it's always, you get a little something else out of it, maybe. So, yeah, we're constantly changing. Our understanding things are changing. Our experiences have changed us. So the material's changing, and maybe we can feel more or feel less, who knows? But it's, something's changing, and it's, we if we pass a certain part of understanding, we hear something else. Oh yeah, this actually makes sense in a different way now. I think I get it better. So yeah, it's a humbling experience. And, like, even when I mean, I just had a 10-day, and even then I'm like, wow, yeah, you never know if it's easy or not easy or whatever you want to call it, because it's always changing. Like, you can have one whole course that's super challenging, you can have a course that's super chill, and then one course it's up and down. I mean, you don't know. And I think that's never going to change, almost, because who knows? That's the practice, right? You're just practicing to become equanimous more and more. So yeah, things are bubbling up, I guess, when you want to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
courses do change. I sat at 20 last year, and I just had a fantastic experience. I mean, I just sailed through it. I didn't have any major discomfort. Um, when I realized that we were on the 10th day, I was like, oh my God, I only have 10 days left. I got to work harder.
Wow.
And after a 20-day, it seemed like a 10-day was pretty short. But I needed to sit a 10-day so that I could sit a 30-day the next season. So I was able to get into a sit at Damodar, a 10-day. And I struggled harder than I ever have, I think.
Hmm.
It was really difficult. Like, for the first 5 days, I was kind of blown away because I'd had such an amazing experience on the 20, and here I thought I was just going to blow through this 10-day, and it was extremely challenging. And then by about the 6th day, I dropped into the zone. But just goes to your point. I mean, don't know. Every time you sit a course, I think there's been some consistencies, some evolving, for sure. I've definitely mastered, I don't want to use that word master, but I've gained some mastery over pain, you know.
Understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, those first couple of courses were very painful. I haven't experienced a lot of pain other than that 10-day last year. But then I sat the 30 day and it was fine.
You're talking about physical pain.
Yeah, physical pain. I mean, the same thing applies to emotional and any kind of sensations, but because you have to address that immediately and apply the techniques to it, and that's all you have is the technique. And so, and strong determination, a dicton, that really helps focus you. And I had some previous experience with that. I took the Silva method of mind control, spent a lot of time with that. And basically, it's self-hypnosis, and they teach you a technique. It's called anesthesia, where basically you just go in the state and you imagine that you're putting your hand into cold water and you're losing sensation, and it's really effective. You know, there's a spectrum, but there are some people that have taken that technique all the way out to being able to have oral surgery with no anesthesia. I think I mentioned that with Lloyd in the last course I took. But so I was already aware of that concept, right? So I think I was able to move through that a little quicker because I already had that mind-body connection. And taking control of your thoughts, of your conscious mind, and then starting to take control of your subconscious and being able to physically control muscles. Like I learned how to.
But this is not what
Go ahead.
Goenkaji teaches, right? I mean, you're talking about, Goenka just mentions to be equanimous, and when you're equanimous with sensations, you don't fight them anymore because you don't see them as pain or pleasure. So you're not going against it. So they just become, I don't want to say just neutral, but you're not labeling them in your mind. So you don't feel them in that way, like positive or negative. So,
Okay, so go ahead.
So I'm just saying that's how I guess go through the physical discomfort or any discomfort, let's say, because I'm just becoming equanimous, meaning I'm not labeling things anymore. I'm just observing sensation. And then that's how I don't worry about the discomforts, let's say.
Okay, so we're talking about learning the technique and going from Anapana to Vipassana, right?
Even in Anapana, you can get to that state because it's just the state of concentration. And when you're so concentrated, there's no space of thinking, oh, this is painful or this is not what I want. It's just you're so focused on observing, those things can't penetrate. I mean, that's how I explain it, at least. So,
but that's how you get that. The goal is to get there, is to get beyond the fields of mind and matter. So you're not feeling any pain. You're not hearing any thoughts. There's no languaging. You're just, you just are the silence. You just are the peace or the equanimity. So we're given this technique to get there. And part of the technique is focusing your awareness. And then once you've spent 3 days with Anapana, focusing your awareness, then you take that new skill and apply it to the rest of your body, looking for sensations. But there's an interesting point there, and I think we talked about it last week between Lloyd and I were talking about it. When you're applying the Vipassana technique, you're using language. I mean, thoughts are words and their language, right? And he's giving you a script. He doesn't talk about how you use language so much, but he does give you an example to follow. He said, oh, look, here's a sensation here in my leg. It's painful. Where is the pain? Well, if I go to the center of it, the pain is greater. If I move out to the edges of it, the pain is less. Well, let me look at it closer. Let me go deeper. Let me go underneath the pain. And by doing that, we learn how to control pain. And that once we've learned how to control it, then we don't need that technique anymore.
The word control is what I guess
it's an interesting
don't
word, isn't it?
think it's correct in the sense that it's not about trying to control this feeling at all, because you're literally just observing. And this is the thing about being mindful, right? Like you're present in the moment, observing what's happening. You're not reacting in any way or judging it like, oh, this is what I don't want or what I want, let's say. good or bad. You're just like, oh, this is happening. That's it. So even sensation, when you're observing them, I don't think he ever says like, oh, it feels worse over here or deeper here. It just, oh, the sensation is stronger here, or it's starting around here, or it takes up this much space or something like that, versus like, like the actual level of pain, in the sense of pain, using the word pain. And again, maybe it just is describing it that way, and I'm just hearing it that way. But if I go back to just the teaching, it's just always sensation and not using the word something that's pleasant or unpleasant, I guess.
Okay, that's the point I'm trying to make. He does say that.
Oh,
He
does.
doesn't talk about it, but he's using language, and he doesn't say, no, you're going to use this language per se, but he does demonstrate that. And he's saying, okay, this is the technique.
It, yeah.
I'm scanning. I find this area of a pain, and there is definitely an exercise, and I recognize it very clearly because it does relate closely to other techniques like the Silva method of mind control. You find a sensation and you make it palpable. And I mean, that's
gross
a lot
sensation,
of people,
though.
A lot of people use that technique of finding a sensation, focusing on it, and not reacting to it, and it will rise up and pass away. But Goenkaji definitely uses language as part of the technique to teach you how to do that. Okay, I'm scanning your body. I mean, he talks about, so you have to make a choice to do that. You have to have an intention. You have to control your thoughts in order to do that. So that's where the concept of control comes in. So when you learn a technique, it introduces you to the concept of thoughts. I mean, some people have never even thought about their own thoughts or thought about watching their thoughts, which is why it's almost impossible for everybody to do when they first sit down to do it, to watch their thoughts, because boom, their thoughts are gone, and your mind is your thoughts and your emotions are vibrations, just like everything else. I mean, that's part of the technique, the way I understand it. So you can get down to a place where there's just awareness of energy and motion. And energy and motion includes the field of mind and matter. So your thoughts and your emotions are vibrations that you're watching and not reacting to. I mean, that's the big picture, but when you actually using the technique and learning how to control your mind. I mean, let's get back to that. It is kind of a foreign concept because you want to get beyond the fields of mind and matter where there is no thought, there are no sensations, but you have to use the technique to get there. And the technique includes using words and using thoughts.
So initially he uses those words, right? Like, and he tries to change, he starts changing and he says gross sensations, like very strong ones or very subtle ones. He goes away from using I don't remember if he says pain or not, but if he does, then he's definitely moving away from it. And like, even at one point he's saying like tingly, itchy, all those words, right?
And scrolling.
Just to describe the sensations, right? But later on, you're not thinking that when you're observing it anymore. You're just like, oh, there is just sensation. And I think that's maybe the stepping stone that I heard in the 10-day course. Like, he starts focusing, oh, they're all just sensations. Stop worrying about if it's hot, cold, or, big or small. You just notice them. Oh, they're sensation. Of course, you're looking for, more flow through the subtle sensations, which I guess signifies something. But he definitely goes away from labeling them more with words. And the mind is always thinking. Like, we're not stopping our thoughts. It's more like the monkey mind gets paused, right? Like, we're not controlling anything really. We're surrendering to the moment and the observation. And when that surrender happens, then the other things just, take a break, because you're so focused on this observation, or this awareness of impermanence. And as that equanimity rises, or concentration rises to equanimity, then things happen without you really having to control or force anything, I guess. It's the way I would think of it. But it's very, I still think surrender is one of the biggest things for me. Once I surrender to just observation and just doing it without trying to change anything, that's when it's becomes more effortless. And of course, my mind is still working. Oh, where's sensation? Is there still more sensation? Let me observe. Maybe there's more subtle sensation. Let me scan again. I'm in my mind working. Like my mind is definitely not idle. Like it's not like a robot running through instruction. It's working many different angles and scanning and staying busy, being aware. And that eventually raises my concentration and gets me to equanimity. But that's how I see it. I don't know if you said the same thing, but I'm just didn't hear the same thing because it is our own experience we're trying to explain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
But those are all interesting parts of the technique. Just that one concept of taking control of your mind.
Mhm.
I totally get what you're saying. That it feels like it's going against what we're learning.
Yeah.
Because
It feels like controlling your mind because the monkey mind stops, right? Like there is no more
Right.
thoughts of, oh, I got to do this later. I mean, those things all go away, right? So it feels like that part of the mind, that monkey mind, that ego kind of gets put on the, in the back seat. That's why it feels like to me just sitting in the back seat there watching, because it doesn't know it's not supposed to work right now, so it's not working. It's just like, okay, I'm not doing anything. I'm just gonna be quiet, and then you can really be clear. I guess that's how I feel, at least.
Well, let's take a look at the process, right? You talking about the monkey mind. You're telling yourself, right? You're taking control of your mind, and in a sense, you're taking control of your breath, because once you put your focus on it, it will probably change. You have to get to a point where you can watch it and not control it. It's
Oh,
tricky to
yeah.
watch your breath do its own thing without you controlling it, because as soon as you put your attention to it, you can change it because you become aware of it. So, that's part of the practice, to become aware of your breath without reacting to it. Just let it be. And so you're trying to focus. You're telling yourself with language, "I'm going to watch my breath now." And then 2 seconds later, you realize you're not focused on your breath. You're fantasizing. You're in the past. You're in the present. Your mind has left the breath. So you consciously tell it to go back, and you do that enough times, and it will become a subconscious process. That's something that I've noticed. So you get to a point where you're not even hearing the words. You're just feeling an energy over here, and you know that that's about to become a word. And so you say, "I'm not interested." And that whole process becomes subconscious. And for me, that's when, if I'm in that mode, that's when I can stay in samadhi and not have any sensations of my body, no awareness of the room or any kind of audio, and have a very sensitive awareness to thoughts that are arising. And it will become a subconscious process which says, "Nope, not interested, not interested, not interested, just staying here. I'm just focused on samadhi." But that becomes, there's no language there anymore. It just becomes a habit pattern of the mind that's subconscious. No longer have any conscious awareness. Sitting on the cushion, it's all subconscious. That make any sense?
For me, I'm always there still, in the sense like that, let's say, when you close your eyes, you have your, let's say your, what do they call it? Your,
Thoughts? Are you having any thoughts?
no, like the mind's eye kind of thing, right? Like when I'm scanning, I'm relaxing not only my real eyes, but also my mind's eye. Like I'm not trying to move my awareness around with, let's say, this idea of seeing. I'm just feeling the sensations, right? So I'm just thinking it through, but my mind is still working normal. Like I'm still saying, okay, there it is. I'm flowing down now through this part. Let me,
Okay, so you're talking. There's the
yeah,
language.
I'm definitely talking to myself. It's like there's this mind that's talking to me, but it's talking only to meditate. But it's not like, it's not mechanical. Like it's just like it's like another me talking to myself. Okay, Trung, now, if you're feeling good flow, now why don't you pierce the spine now? Or, so it's kind of like
So that's
I'm a
you
guided.
mimicking
Yeah.
Goenkaji's process. He didn't really talk to you about how to use language and all that, but he showed you. This is, oh look, I'm feeling my knees now. Is there pain there? Is there no pain there? So you're having an inner dialogue with yourself, and then you can lose track of that and go off and fantasize, talk about and think about the past, think about something that's going to happen in the future, or just go and fantasize. And then you have to say, oh, I'm fantasizing. I'm going to go back and continue with my round, right? So
Right.
that's the language.
Yeah.
Those
That's
are the
language.
words you're using, and you have control over that by its very nature. You're trying to control your mind and
Right.
your awareness to do certain things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, and at some point, what I'm saying is it becomes subconscious. So you're getting beyond mind and matter, and you're entering fields of samadhi, and you have no awareness. There is no language. Your body is just doing what it does, and you're aware of it. Or actually, I mean, in samadhi, you're aware of you lose awareness of your body. You go beyond the fields of mind and body. You go beyond the fields of mind and matter.
I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's like even when I feel like, let's say there's no body, I can easily just if I need to, I'll just move my finger. I'll be like, no, there's still body. And let me keep observing, and then, I mean, I just give example, just, it's like a double check, right? Like, oh yeah, it feels like I have, nothing there anymore. But the reality is there's always something there. And concentration doesn't fall off just because you wiggle a toe. In the sense, you're just like, oh, there it is, and then I go back and observe, and there's subtle sensation, there's flow, and then maybe there's no more sensation even again. So I mean, I don't know, everybody has their own checks and balances, because we're taught a technique to observe but be our own master, right? Like, do I really understand what that means, having, let's say, no body, whatever? Because it's, your mind is also in this other state of understanding, or like a new experience. So for me, that's usually like, oh, well, it's a new experience, but everything is still the same, maybe. And I'm just checking it, kind of thing. And it's, I've done it many times, so it's not like a big deal. I don't do it all the time, because I'm just, oh, I'm here again, whatever. But I could talk to myself very clearly, and I get to.
I'm losing your audio. Can you hear me?
I can still hear you.
Okay, you just came back. You got garbled and then you went away.
Weird. Could be my internet.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we probably could talk about this all day, and like, it just be us explain our own experience. And
Well, I think that's part of the value of it. I think people at the service table, I believe that people talking about their own experience, especially in that conditioned atmosphere, when you're using noble speech and if there are any deeper questions, you can go to an AT. But I think people learn an awful lot by sharing, and it goes both ways. Listening to people's experience and sharing your own. I know it helps to talk about these principles with other people and get other people's opinion on it, and then you think about it, and then it continues to evolve that way, I think.
yeah, I think when I serve, I don't talk about meditating too much unless it's somebody I know.
Yeah.
Depending if a student is new or not, they could be like, oh, what is happening? Like, why don't I get this? Or like, I don't understand what they're talking about. And in reality, you're never going to really understand everything, because we're all on a different spot on this practice, riding this bicycle, whatever you want to call it. So
Yeah.
some people are just, oh yeah, I don't need to look anymore. I can ride a bicycle without looking, and it's like, yeah, it's just different for everybody. So it's no way to really explain. That's why I always go back to just saying, yeah, for me, it's more about surrendering. That's why I'm talking about more about the general part of it. For me, it's really surrendering to the observation of, having awareness of impermanence, and not using words. For me, it's not labeling things in a positive or negative way. Like, that's literally all I do when I meditate. I don't label anything. I just observe sensation. And if we do Anapana, I just observe the natural breath until I'm literally just observing the natural breath, and it becomes more shallow, whatever, all these things start happening. You're like, oh yeah, there it is. I'm getting more relaxed, or more calm, body and mind. And I'm going in in the sense, I'm getting in a little deeper. I can observe it a little better now, because I know I'm just letting my body breathe, like the minimum almost, or whatever it needs, the maximum that it needs, right? So then I can kind of observe it better. I'm like, oh yeah, I can really tell this is my natural breath now. Like, I'm breathing not that strong, because this is all I need right now, sitting here. So I can kind of start telling that this is it. And then I'll know eventually that, oh yeah, I'm not trying at all. I'm just watching the natural breath. So mine is more like a lot of surrender and just relaxing almost, but also putting in the effort to come back to the natural breath over and over. So there is this part of relaxing into this process, but also a lot of effort to stay in the process of meditating, so observing. So and that's my explanation. Obviously someone else has a different one.
Yeah, but I think that's important, sharing. I mean, just by sharing that information, sometimes people will find something that they can relate to.
Yeah.
And it's just because we're all there alone. You know what I mean? We just have the dissertations, and you get into places where you think you're the only person in the world that's experiencing this. And then you talk to someone else and they say, oh yeah, this is my experience. Maybe like yours or not, but you learn an awful lot by hearing other people's opinion about what they're going through. So you don't feel like you're, the only person in the world that's going through it.
Yeah.
I think that's an important aspect of it.
This is definitely great also to share with an AT. Like, if you really want to see what they think, like, hey, this is what I do, this is what happens, what do you think? And they could be like, oh, that's great. Or they could be like, oh, that's great, but you can also try this too. Or if you get stuck or you feel whatever, then you can add this to it. So they can tell you actually a little more than Goenka-ji, you might hear from his videos. So, I'm not going to tell you what they might say, obviously, but every AT is different. But they can give you more hints and tips and tricks that, I'm not qualified to tell you, because I don't really know what you need, let's say. But yeah, it's all about the hindrances and the enemies, whatever you want to call them, and how to combat them during meditation. And if once you get good at that, then meditating becomes a little bit more simple, because you have tools to get out of, your mind being restless, or, you being sleepy while you meditate. So yeah, it's definitely good to talk to an AT if you ever have the chance, especially when you serve, because then you have a lot of time to actually get to know ATs if you want to. So yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a natural progression too of students sitting at the table, servers sitting at the table, having discussions, and then being able to take that discussion to an AT. It helps you sort it out, helps you flesh it out for yourself, kind of bounce it off other people, and then take it to an AT. I think that's pretty valuable experience.
Yeah. I think all of it is valuable if you're there, you're open to learn, right? You're not just saying, oh, my way is the right way, or I understand it like this, and must be the only way, because it's not true. Everybody's different. And, to be open is also to be quantumous, right? Like, oh yeah, it's possible. Anything's possible, because before I meditated, I didn't know any of this was possible. So like, if you really look at the big picture, anything and everything's possible, until you just don't know because you haven't experienced it yet, maybe. So, but definitely for me, I do try to focus on the purity of the technique, because it is easy to add your own stuff to it, because we know so much stuff already, right? That maybe worked for us before. So like, this whole process is not about knowing why, or, why or when all these things happen that I'm not feeling good about myself or this, my life or something, because the practice is just to surrender, and then the answers will, all the things happen on their own. Like, you don't need to understand things intellectually. And this is the thing that for me, I see very different from, regular therapy, or the therapy I've heard of is like, you try to find the suffering, the trauma, and you try to deal with it, you try to live it and change it through, observing it again happening. But in Goenka Jitsi, he never says any of this stuff. He just says, hey, things are gonna feel not good maybe, or good. And it could be traumas, they could not be traumas, but whatever comes up, you don't worry about it and you just observe them. Because the thing we're running away from is feeling the process of like what's happening, the experience, right? And we run away from it, and that's why we have trauma, or whatever you want to call it. So as soon as you get better at understanding sensation, that they're just overwhelming you maybe, and we label them good or bad. But in the end, if you really just can be like, oh, it's just a sensation, no matter, good or bad, or if it's overwhelming or underwhelming, then something could change in your own, understanding of sensations, which is emotions, feelings, whatever you want to call them. But that's how I benefited from the practice. And so that's how I explain it, at least. But what do you think, Barry? What do you think about that? Because, it's definitely not an intellectual game or a game of sensation. It's just, I'm here to experience sensation and become, I don't want to say neutral to it, but I don't want to react to them anymore. And by becoming non-reactive, you can actually go through them and be quantumous and actually learn that, hey, that feeling isn't going to kill me. Why am I so scared, or trying to run away, or trying to hide, or trying to fill up some other emotion, to distract it, or to feel better in a moment, right? Whatever that might mean.
Covering a lot of ground.
Yeah. I mean, we're
trying to find a place to jump in there. But one of the things that you touched upon is Goenka doesn't want, like, this is basically, okay, what do we have in common with other modalities? We're going down to, I like to call it going into state, which is like going into a place where your brain is putting out alpha or theta, let's say alpha, theta, or delta brain waves. So you're going into, and it's a place that hypnotists use because you're very suggestible, right? We're already, that's built into the process. That's where we're going. We're going to a calm, quiet mind. And we want to go beyond thought. And the idea is that is a very suggestible place to be, right? Your mind's set up to take information without distraction. So you find a sensation, and it could be one of those ones set in granite, right? We have the ones in sand, we have the ones in granite. And you could be, you could be aware of the sensation, and you recognize the feeling of it. And then it can have some thoughts associated with it. And it can take you back to, like, say, a moment of childhood trauma, right? This is a neural network in your brain that was formed at a moment of trauma when you were a kid. And you're quieting yourself, and you find that sensation that's locked in your body that was that moment of trauma. So in that moment, we're told to just observe it, don't react to it, and let it rise up and pass away. But while that's happening, it's not unusual for you to remember the moment that came on board. Like, you can remember the traumatic event that caused that neural network to form. And you can have an inspiration or a revelation that when you realize that, and you can consciously let it go. You can do it subconsciously and consciously. It's like, I remember that. That's when that dog bit me. And now I can see how my entire life I've been afraid of dogs. And it's all these neural networks have fired and wired with that, so that I have an association when I walk into that house of being bitten by a dog. And I don't remember being bitten by a dog, but I feel very uncomfortable in that house. It's
definitely a good way to look at it. Like, having this sensation feeling and match it up to some memory, right? Like that's how it feels to me too. Like, oh yeah, I felt like this that one time. I remember clearly. And then
And just let me just interject right there. Goenka does talk about that, but it goes by really quickly. He'll acknowledge that can happen, but he doesn't want you to dwell on it, which is what you were talking about, right? But it can be, a real revelation to you. You can't be getting rid of some old trauma in that moment, and you can be conscious of it, but it can also happen unconsciously. Okay,
I agree. Yeah, and I think the reason why he says don't get focused on it, because now you're not meditating anymore. Now the mind starts playing games with this thing. Oh man, like, oh, this is so good. Now, next thing you know, you're not meditating anymore, even if it's a good thought or, good processing. And the other reality is maybe that wasn't the thing, it's just what you wanted to tie it in with. There could be something deeper even, right? And this is the first layer of this feeling, let's say, that's bringing it up. So it's always good to remember, like you said, Goenkaji talks about this, and he also reminds you, don't start playing with it, because then your mind starts getting involved, and now you're not meditating. Now you're sitting the whole day. I'm like, man, that was so good, and like I did so well. Next thing you know, you're just not. The reason why you're there is to meditate, to really have that space. So I get what you're saying, though. I have those moments, and it's challenging to be like, oh yeah, don't focus on it, even though now you feel good or whatever, right?
To me, it goes with the whole concept of this is a technique that's pointing you towards somewhere, and once you get there, you don't need the technique anymore. So you don't want to confuse the technique with the final goal.
Yeah. I mean, they do talk about this emptiness thing. So it's interesting. Yeah, the technique is, like you said, it's a way to get to this place, and that's why I say that even the explanation of the technique, I feel like I don't want to say it's totally changing, but the experience of it is changing. And even when I practice, it's maybe changing a little bit now. Maybe I don't need to go part by part as much. I'm just giving an example. Like it could be something like that. And you're your own master. You only you can play with it, but always come back to the basics just to double check. That's what I do. I'm like, oh yeah, well, let me go back to the basics just in case. But then, of course, if I'm feeling, cell sensation, everywhere, then, then you can start, flowing more or whatever, right? So I do pay attention to where I'm at on in the technique itself, and then I might add stuff, take things out, whatever, and move along, kind of thing. But the emptiness part does Goenkaji talk about that? I don't even know if he calls it emptiness.
It's kind of Nibbana. That's kind of the point. You know what I mean? It's like you want to get to emptiness where all of this falls away. It brings up all these other concepts. It's the difference between a monk and a householder. This technique was, when in the hands of a monk, the final goal is Nibbana. I mean, it's sitting in a cage. It's letting go of everything in 3D. Mm-hmm. Including thoughts and feelings. But that's not a state that anyone can describe. You can't tell another person what that state is. So everybody has to decide what the final goal is for them. And we're walking our path alone, and we have the metaphor of walking a path to a final goal, but you have to define all of that. They'll tell you what it is, what their opinion is, but you have to decide what it is for yourself. And
for like the monks, right? Like even the Buddha, right? Like when he became enlightened, he wasn't living without body and mind. He still had a body and mind. He still felt pain, physical pain. He still felt all the things, but now he doesn't react anymore because he has understood the true nature of this existence, right? So by knowing that there is a place that has no mind and matter, let's say Nibbana, then he really understood it. So he's not attached anymore to this realm of mind and matter. But that doesn't mean he didn't live like a person who couldn't feel or anything like that. He still felt, everything just like we feel. He just didn't let it cause him to have desire or aversion. That's the only difference, literally, because he knows we're in a simulation in the sense of mind and matter, because we have mind and matter. And yeah, you taking a long course, you know, he talks about it very clearly on a long course, why we are in the human existence, right? The samsara, so that we can have the opportunity to actually practice to become enlightened, to experience suffering, to become, to have no mind and body experience. So that's what I got out of it, at least.
Right, get off the wheel of misery and onto the wheel of happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can drag this on forever, I'm sure.
It is an endless topic, and it is, could happen in an instant, or it could take multiple lifetimes.
I mean, it depends on your karma, I heard, but who knows?
But reincarnation and rebirth are not part of my belief system. I think because I'm not enlightened. That's one of the things I liked about this tradition is when,
but what do you mean? What do you mean, though? But you understand what impermanence means, right?
Well, as far as Anicca, yeah.
I mean,
do I know it? Do I know
Anicca
it?
applies to everything, even to us.
What?
Anicca applies to everything. It's the ultimate truth, right? So it applies to us as well. So why would you not believe in rebirth, let's say, in some way? Because we are also...
Because I have no knowledge of it, and I have no knowledge. We're supposed to do what the Buddha did. He experienced this as for himself. So he comes out of the meditation, he says, I am now enlightened. And I am enlightened because I have experienced the world as it is. And then he went and defined exactly what he experienced. Wavelets, energy going in and out, and it correlates perfectly with current quantum physics, right? Which is all very interesting. So I have not experienced that. So I am not enlightened. So I have theories about things, but so ever since I was a kid, I would look at something and say, okay, that's true enough. It's true enough for me to incorporate into my belief system. And that may change. I may get more information and say, oh, you know what? I was wrong about that. I no longer believe that. Right? So each one of us is creating a belief system that we bring to this practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and I love it because, Goenkaji gives you that metaphor of the kid being given porridge by his mother, right? And there's a stone in it. And the kid says, I don't want the porridge because there's a stone in it. And she please take it out. So we are invited to just believe what we can believe.
Correct.
And put anything else aside. One of the things Goenka says, and eventually you bring it back in.
No, you're totally right.
You're going to find out that it's actually true. Everything's true.
Yeah.
But for the meantime, you're your own master. You can, if you believe in that, good, go with that. That's a good part of the technique.
Yeah. But we're actually observing impermanence within us, right? So the more you understand it, and that's why he says sampajana, right? Like you're supposed to observe it at all times, this thing that we think is permanent, but it isn't. It's impermanent. And the nature of everything is impermanent when you really understand it. That's how we're in the realm of suffering. That's all we are, because everything is suffering because we don't believe it yet. We're still ignorant, right? So we're always going to be suffering because we don't believe it. That's why we can't be enlightened, right? So the understanding is just you get deeper in the understanding. And the thing with impermanence, it's one of the ultimate truths. So if it's really true and you can feel it within you by direct experience, then you will know theoretically that, oh yeah, why do I think I'm something that's permanent or impermanent? I mean, permanent in the sense of I'll be gone forever, or permanent that I'm gonna last forever. Obviously, we're not lasting forever, but that also means being permanent, that if you die, you never come back, right? So impermanence, if you really start, I'm just saying, like, I'm just explaining it like in my terms, like that means, so there is a possibility that I'm going to come back in some way, whatever that means, right? Because I am also impermanent. Everything within me is impermanent, even my thoughts and my left toe, whatever, everything's impermanent, right? So if I really understand that within my own direct experience meditating, then it would start making sense maybe that, oh yeah, Why do I think I'm gonna be gone forever or only exist right now and that's it? But again, like the Buddha, like you said, you don't have to believe everything, and until you get there, then you get there. But it's a possibility, is what I'm saying, right? Like it is possible that we might get reincarnated or reborn. I don't know. I mean, nobody actually knows for sure, right? Until it happens, right? But
I would agree with that.
yeah,
That was a big question on my mind ever since by the time I became a teenager. And it's one of the things that attracted me to doing isolation tank work, floating.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
you get, you know, okay, so the idea is you're getting rid of all the
Yeah, you don't feel your
sensations.
body. Yeah.
Oh, you're right. It's supposed to be total darkness, no sound. So you're limiting the information that your body's taking in, and certain things happen. Your
Well,
body
it's
starts
taking in the
functioning
information,
in
but it
another way.
feels like, I mean, the body is still taking the information, but it feels the same temperature as your body. So it gets confused. It thinks there is no more ending to your body. Because
No, you're just limiting sensations. You're just limiting sensations to, I mean, your body, you can't get rid of all of them. Your subconscious mind is always tracking what's happening. But because your conscious mind is taking in so much information visually, a lot of information, auditory, feeling, all that information is always being monitored by your subconscious mind and fed into your mind to create your experience, to keep your body at homeostasis. All those processes are always going on. But when you limit what your conscious mind is taking, like in sleep, your body goes through a totally different thing. So what I used to do is go into the tank, get into that zone where I couldn't feel anything as much as possible. And then I would ask myself the question, if I die, what would continue on? Try to find something about me that would continue to go on. Because when you start to lose your body, you say, okay, I don't need any clothes, I don't need any heat, I don't need a house. All those things that takes up so much of my conscious awareness. I don't need to eat. I'm just, what would I take if I left this body? And how,
that's the thing. There
and
is no
what
mind
would,
and body
but
eventually.
so much of who we are, our personalities, are the culture that we live in, the body that we inherited, all of that stuff. So if you were to come back, what would you take? You know, that was the exercise that I went through. And I'm still at a place where I don't know. I don't have a clue what would happen. It doesn't seem like there's much of who I am now that could possibly continue, because so much of who I am now is about my body and my physical experience and all the experiences I've had so far in life. You know,
I would,
what would what would you bring with you if you were born a baby girl in Mongolia tomorrow,
yeah. So
or to the
the
bushes?
explanation, at least, is that the only thing you carry along is karma, and I think they explain it in many different, I mean, in certain ways, but I don't remember right now. But for me, it's like, you know, the meditation. If you start understanding non-self more too, it could also, I mean, you know, we're standing impermanence, suffering, or unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, right? No ego, because this ego is still trying to hang on to this thing that I'm real, I'm something, right? Like if you didn't have an ego, you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm Barry. You're just a sensation, a thing with a bunch of sensations. That thing is gonna, guess what, rise and pass, just like any other sensation.
Right.
So
So
theoretically,
that ego wouldn't reincarnate.
well, I don't know. I mean, I don't understand it myself either. I just try to explain it based on meditating and understanding the ultimate truth. And I think when you start understanding the ultimate truth, the maybe that other part about reincarnating makes more sense. That's my guess.
Okay, we were actually taught a little bit about that because Goenkaji mentions it a couple of times, that at the moment of death, you will have like a primary feeling tone sensation that if you haven't, if you're not completely clear of sensations, if you haven't released them all, there's going to be one at the time of death that is going to be like a vibration that's going to move forward and reanimate something. But it's just, you know, it's just the way he describes it. It sounds like it's just one single sankara is what he's saying. So it's an energy form that at the moment of death is going to be pushed out and propel another lifetime. Do you remember that?
He pretty much says your state of being in the moment of death, if you're not equanimous, I mean, whatever the state might be, if you're equanimous, let's say, or a higher vibration or whatever you want to call it, then you will be pulled into a plane or existence with that similar vibration, because it's like you're attracting that vibration. If you have a very low vibration because you're very hurt or sad or fear or whatever, I don't know, anger, then you can get pulled into that kind of vibration. And that's how I understood it. The different,
but it has nothing to do with your ego, right? Has nothing to, it's
so
only...
the ego thinks it's real. That's why it is part of the ego, right? The ego thinks I am really suffering. That's why I'm feeling suffering.
Talking about a next life, though, just that one concept of moving forward, because if you go back and look at the sutras that he's referring to there, it gets really complicated, the way they describe what happens at the moment of death. And that's what Goenkaji is alluding to. He's not teaching it.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk about it in depth, but that's what he's referring to, that moment of death and just a single vibration coming out. Just one sankara out of all the sankaras that you have had during your lifetime, all the energy that's flown through you in this lifetime, they're saying that just one little vibration that moves forward. So that's not really like pre-birth. That's not like you know, that you were once, you know, a warlord and now you're a woman having a baby. You know what I mean?
I mean, he definitely doesn't tie it in like that, because it's really the life you live and how you live it. You could be a king, you could be a pauper, but how you live and how you feel and how you are in those different roles, or the ego you get to create, then doesn't necessarily you're happy or unhappy. That's why, and they say even if you practice this is in the long course, when you practice the jhanas and you can get to the higher jhanas, and in the time of death you're in the higher jhanas, just because you can go to a different plane because you have a high vibration doesn't mean it's helpful. And I mean, there's a lot of explanation, and again, I don't know everything, but from what I understand is you just need to be in a good place and clean up your karma that's not that good,
or purify the fields of mind and matter.
Yeah,
right.
Because it can always pull you back. Even if you have a good life next time, there's still this past sankara that is then dormant still, and when it comes, it'll pull you to whatever. Let's say,
so even if you just slow down where you just said that, it will pull you, but there really is no you to pull.
There's
right?
no
All
you.
we're talking about, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
They're talking about just
it's just vibration,
mind of vibration moving forward. That's got nothing to do with your previous ego or personality or culture or any of that.
There's no because there is none of it. We are not actually existing. We're just a flicker in a moment, right? We're just like me and you. This is actually not even, I mean, I don't want to say it's not happening, but it's not anything that's permanent, right? Like the person who's talking right now has already changed. And if we actually understand it at that deep level, or whatever we want to call it, then we're not attached to any of this thing we're saying, you know? And there's nothing, it's always going to change. Like next time we talk about the same conversation right now, it could be totally different. And this is the reality. We're constantly changing. And that's why there is no you or me. Like compared to us, 5 years ago, or 15 or 20 or 30 years ago, there is no me, like, or you, right? Like it's just something changing. We have memories, and even the memories change. There is no actually us. It's just whatever is present right now. That's the only thing that there exists, because obviously there is no future, because we don't know that future. We're not psychic. And the past already happened. We're not changing it anymore. So we have no control over those things. So the only thing we're actually controlling is these words coming out of my mouth right now. And that's why everything is actually impermanent. And I think the deeper and deeper you go with the Chittamaya Panya and all this other stuff, then you really start seeing it's just things happening. It's flickering on and off. Like, oh, now I'm thinking this, I'm saying this, and now I feel a certain way. And that's just things that's happening nonstop. And same thing with body sensation, because I mean, that's what we focus on, because there's always body sensation. And that's the gift of body sensation, I guess, in the Goenkaji tradition's teaching. So, I mean, yeah, we definitely covered a lot more than I thought we were going to cover. But
yeah, for a little housekeeping promo, we kind of went deep, but that's what happens. So it happens at the table.
We could definitely have a chat about the reincarnation part sometime, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I know it well enough to talk about it that much. But I do.
I think it's interesting, and I think it's interesting as a concept because I mean we're building our own world constructs, you know,
Oh yeah.
and we're trying to decide how this practice applies to our entire lives, and the fact that we are, I mean, we're told we have to decide for ourselves what the final goal is because it's indescribable. We're all using this technique
I mean,
to
Goenkaji described it though very clearly, so we
describe
know.
what
He totally told us what it is at the end.
what is what.
Nibbana.
Oh, really? What's
Yeah.
Nibbana?
He simply just said, the Buddha says the same thing. It's when you have no mind and no matter.
And what is that?
That means you are just energy or whatever that means.
Can you know what
Subatomic
that
particles,
is?
or
Can
maybe
you know
not,
that
actually
is?
not
Hey,
anything. This whole
can you
thing
know
is,
what that is without experiencing it?
I mean, no, nobody knows
Oh, well,
until you
that's it.
experience it.
That's it. That's all
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying. You have to find it for yourself. That's why Gautama said, I am enlightened. I'm enlightened because I've experienced the world as it is. And until you experience the world as it is, you won't be enlightened. But once you do, you will be enlightened.
Right,
Okay?
right.
So he can't tell you. I mean, Goenka says that over and over again. You have to go there yourself. I can't carry you. I can show you. He gives you all these metaphors and stories about
Yeah.
Gautama saying, I can't take you there. I can only point out the path. You have to walk the path. You have to find out what it
Yeah.
is for yourself. Right?
But we
That's the
do
whole
understand.
point. Nibbana is not definable.
Yeah, but we do know what it entails, right? Like when you get to Nibbana, you are not suffering anymore, right? You have all the compassion in the world. I mean, I'm just giving you, like, this is you will have the qualities
I
of
would
the
agree
Buddha.
with you, but if you get into the sutras, then in Buddhism, there's all these different levels. You can be in samadhi, you can be in nibbana, and they've like, oh yeah, but you could still suffer and you could still come back. And,
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
There's
it's hard to
stages.
make absolute statements.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely different stages, and some people jump all the way. Some people take their time. I don't know, but no, totally. Like, it's humbling experience for, I'm sure, everybody, even people who become enlightened. So we're still in a world of mind and body. So even if you become enlightened, you're going to suffer until you literally become an arahant, right? So yeah, it's a thing. And yeah, but at least you know what you can work towards too. You have an idea, like, oh yeah, let me keep purifying myself, or whatever you want to call it, and eventually I'll find more peace. I'll live a better life in the sense of more, instead of joy of having a nice house or being safe, you have joy because you're equanimous. You have joy because you're not reacting to everything that's coming at you. So there's the joy. Things how you live change, and they become reality as it is, versus I'm living in this simulation. I gotta fight all these things all the time. But yeah. Well, it was a good chat today. I think we can call it.
Always, brother.
Yeah, man. Thanks for listening to me for that 1 or 10 minutes I was going at it.
That's listening. That's a big part of the job.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
definitely. It's a good skill to have.
I like to think that I'm a good listener.
Yeah, I think
Sometimes
maybe
you sit down with somebody and you ask one question, and an hour later, you knew everything about that person, and they haven't asked you a single question. So it's good. I mean, most of the conversations I've had at the table are very respectful. People there to learn. It's a different feel oftentimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been lucky with the people I served with for sure. And yeah, one more thing is, like, maybe next time we can talk about metta. What do you think?
Well, we've talked about it. We've covered a lot of ground. I mean, part of it is it's like we just wake up Sunday morning and start yakking.
Mm-hmm.
But it's starting to come together. Technically, we've gotten a lot better, I think. I think the last 3 or 4, you could actually hear them. That's been a good improvement.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I had some audio issue too, but yeah, I'm just thinking about if we can plan out something for next week, then we can talk about metta or something. Like, we can think about it ahead of time. there's a lot about metta we could talk about for sure, for example.
Yeah. I try to, and I know Lloyd has, typed up docs and sent them out for topics, and we like doing that. I mean, usually if we can't talk a couple of days before, we've only done it a couple of times, but patterns starting to emerge. If we haven't talked a couple of days before, that half hour from 9:30 to 10, we'll just kick things around, and Lloyd will make notes and that he can ask questions on. So I think because we've been doing it extemporaneously,
Okay.
no, I mean, we've done a pretty good job at just, getting it started, but we would like to, I'd like to prepare more. I love thinking about concepts, roughing it out, and then putting it out there so that we're not just flailing quite so much, with principles. It's nice to refresh your memory about stuff so that you're not always wondering what.
Yeah, and the thing with metta too, not a lot of people experience metta, I think, until they serve, and they have service metta. So that's how I was thinking we could talk about it too. Like on a 10-day course, you only do metta a couple times.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's a big topic. I know I've talked about it with servers in the past, because when I first started doing the meditation, I was uncomfortable. And I was like, wow, because it brings up, first of all, we're told to love ourselves. So if you have any, self-love issues, boom, they come right up. And I've talked to a number of other people who found it difficult. And, it was definitely a process to get to a place where you're comfortable giving and sharing love. And we're told we have to get into a loving space first. And if you can't get there, then don't do the meditation.
Snap, save this for the podcast, for the next one.
Okay. All right.
Let's do it then. We'll do metta next time.
Okay, kid.
All right, man. Have a good Sunday, and thanks everybody for coming to listen to the Service Podcast. It's Trung and Barry, and hopefully Lloyd can join us next time and hang.
All right, man.
Well, take care.
Talk to you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.